the murder of Lorenzan Wright. Picture this. It's 2010, and Lorenzan Wright, a 6-foot 11-inch gentle giant who once pounded the boards for the Memphis Grizzlies, suddenly vanishes. No tweets, no sightings, nothing. And look, NBA players sometimes disappear, but usually it's just into the off-season buffet line, not off the face of the earth. A few days later, Memphis police find his body in a wooded area. Multiple gunshot wounds. It was brutal, it was tragic, and it left the entire basketball world asking, what in the world just happened? Now, let's rewind. Wright wasn't just some bench warmer. He was a hometown hero. Born in Memphis, drafted into the NBA, and played 13 seasons in the league. He was the kind of player who'd give you solid minutes, hustle plays, and that classic tall guy at the cookout energy. By all accounts, people loved him. But behind the scenes, things weren't so perfect. Wright had money problems. His marriage to Shara Wright was falling apart. And when the truth came out, it was darker than anyone expected. Shara wasn't just his ex-wife. She became the mastermind behind his murder. Prosecutors revealed she'd lured him to a meeting where he was ambushed and shot. And just when you think this story can't get darker, Shara collected on his $1 million life insurance policy after his death. Honestly, it sounds less like an NBA tale and more like something out of a true crime podcast. The case dragged on for nearly a decade before Shara was finally sentenced. Fans, teammates, and even people who barely followed basketball were left stunned. It wasn't just about a player's death, it was the betrayal, the greed, and the sheer coldness behind it. Wright once said that Memphis was where his heart was. In the end, it was also where his life was taken. And if that doesn't make you double-check who you trust, nothing will. Michael Ray Richardson. If you ever wanted to know what it looks like when pure talent collides headfirst with pure chaos, look no further than Michael Ray Richardson. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, this man was electric. Drafted 4th overall by the New York Knicks in 1978, he had the skills to make even Larry Bird stop and say, yeah, that guy's good. In fact, Bird once called him the best point guard in the league. Imagine having Larry Legend co-sign you like that. You're basically basketball royalty at that point. But here's the twist. For every jaw-dropping steal or clutch bucket, there was a darker story playing out behind the scenes. Richardson had a reputation for wild living, and his real opponent wasn't on the court. It was cocaine. His career became a tragic highlight reel of suspensions and comebacks. The NBA kept giving him chances because his talent was undeniable, and Richardson kept fumbling them because his addiction was just as undeniable. Eventually, the league said, enough is enough. He became the first player ever to be permanently banned under the NBA's anti-drug policy. Think about that. A guy who could have been a Hall of Famer who had all the gifts ended up being remembered as a cautionary tale. It's like buying the latest iPhone and then using it only as a paperweight. So much potential, completely wasted. The saddest part? Richardson wasn't a bad guy. Teammates loved him, fans loved him, and even after his downfall, he tried to rebuild his life in basketball overseas. But the story of Michael Ray Richardson will always be the one where talent met temptation. And temptation won. Shawn Kemp's spiral. Shawn Kemp's post-NBA story reads less like a Hall of Fame highlight reel and more like a reality show nobody asked for. One minute he's dunking on defenders, the next he's dunking himself into legal trouble. In 2005, police in Shoreline, Washington, approached his parked car after noticing a strong odor of marijuana. A search turned up about 60 grams of marijuana, a small amount of cocaine, and a semi-automatic pistol. He got arrested and later pleaded guilty to trying to possess more than 40 grams of marijuana. The very next year, in 2006, trouble found him again in Houston, Texas. This time, he was pulled over because his car didn't have a license plate. The officer reported smelling marijuana, and a search of the car uncovered less than 2 ounces. Kemp was charged with misdemeanor possession and released after posting a $500 bond. Fast forward to 2023, and Kemp made headlines once again. After tracking his stolen cell phone to a parking lot at Tacoma Mall, things escalated into a confrontation where shots were fired. Kemp said he had been shot at first and returned fire only in self-defense. At first, no charges were filed, but on April 14th, he was officially charged with first-degree assault. For a while, it looked like this could end in disaster, but by May 2025, Kemp accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree assault, a lesser charge that spared him the worst outcome. And in August, the sentence came down. Kemp avoided prison, instead receiving 30 days of electronic home monitoring, 1 year of state supervision, and 240 hours of community service. Basically, the justice system grounded him, slapped an ankle bracelet on, and said, "Go mow some lawns for the community." Javaris Crittenton's downfall. Javaris Crittenton is the kind of name that makes NBA fans squint and go, "Wait, didn't he play with the Wizards for a hot second?" And yes, he did. But unfortunately, his biggest highlight wasn't a dunk or a clutch shot. It was a gun scandal that looked straight out of a bad buddy cop movie. Back in 2009, Crittenton and teammate Gilbert Arenas got into an argument over a gambling debt during a Wizards team flight. By the time they landed, it escalated into a locker room standoff where both players pulled out guns. Imagine walking in just trying to lace up your sneakers and your teammates are staging Training Day 2. The NBA suspended them both, and like that, Crittenton's career was cooked. But instead of bouncing back, things got darker. In 2011, police linked him to the shooting death of a 22-year-old woman in Atlanta. Surprisingly, she wasn't even the intended target. Prosecutors said Crittenton was aiming for someone else in a drive-by. He went from wearing a jersey to wearing handcuffs, and with that, the downfall was complete. By 2015, Crittenton pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and aggravated assault with a weapon. His sentence? 23 years in prison. That's longer than his entire NBA career by about 22.5 years. It's one of the darkest stories the league has ever seen. From first-round pick to prison time, Crittenton's downfall shows how fast the game of life can turn. One day you're guarding Kobe, the next you're guarding your lunch in the prison cafeteria. Chris Washburn's collapse. Chris Washburn was once supposed to be the future. A 6'11" powerhouse drafted 3rd overall in 1986, he had the size, the skills, and the spotlight. But instead of becoming the next great big man, Washburn became the poster child for wasted talent. From the very start, things looked shaky. At North Carolina State, he got caught stealing a stereo from a dorm room. Not exactly a confidence booster for NBA scouts, but Golden State still gambled on him in the draft, believing he could turn it around. Spoiler alert, he didn't. In just 3 NBA seasons, Washburn was suspended 3 times for drug use. By 1989, he was banned from the league after failing yet another drug test. His stats tell the story: 72 career games, 2.4 points per game, and way too many nights partying instead of practicing. He once admitted he couldn't even remember some of the games he played in because he was so high. That's not in the zone. That's in another galaxy. His post-NBA life wasn't any smoother. Addiction dragged him down for decades, bouncing between rehab centers, jail, and the streets. For a while, he was living homeless in Houston. From 3rd overall pick to asking for change, it was one of the fastest collapses the league has ever seen. After a turning point in 2000, Washburn has achieved 24 years of sobriety and has since become a motivational speaker and entrepreneur, sharing his story of redemption and battling addiction. But the damage has already been done. Melvin Turpin suicide. Melvin Turpin became a star at the University of Kentucky, earning All-American honors and helping lead the Wildcats to the 1984 Final Four. That same year, he was taken 6th overall in the NBA draft by the Washington Bullets before being traded to Cleveland. But the pro career that once looked so promising never quite matched the college glory. Turpin played 5 seasons in the NBA with Cleveland, Utah, and Washington. He averaged 8.5 points and just under 5 rebounds per game, but constant struggles with weight slowed him down. What should have been a dominant career as a 7-footer faded into the background fast. Fans and media gave him cruel nicknames like Dinner Bell Mel, which sounds funny until you realize it was eating away at his confidence. It's hard to dominate the paint when the world is more focused on what's on your dinner plate. Life after basketball was much quieter. Turpin took regular jobs, including working as a security guard at the University of Kentucky Hospital. For a guy who once had thousands of fans cheering him on, keeping watch over hospital hallways was a big change. Still, people who knew him described him as kind and approachable, someone who didn't brag about the NBA days but wasn't cold either. On July 8, 2010, tragedy struck. Turpin died at his home in Lexington from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the age of 49. No note was made public, leaving friends, family, and fans shocked and searching for answers. His death rattled the Kentucky basketball community, with former teammates and coaches remembering him as gentle, private, and talented. Turpin's story highlights the silent struggles athletes often face once the lights go out. When the crowd stops cheering and the routine of the game disappears, the transition can be devastating. For Turpin, the weight of that silence became too much. Eddie Curry's family. In 2009, Curry's former girlfriend, Nova Henry, and their 10-month-old daughter were brutally murdered in Chicago. Nova's 3-year-old son, Noah, was also in the home, but miraculously was left unharmed. The killer was Frederick Goings, a 36-year-old attorney who had once represented Nova in a paternity case involving Eddie Curry. They got romantically involved, and let's just say it was anything but healthy. The relationship was a disaster from the jump. Nova had tried to cut ties before. Back in 2007, she even filed for an order of protection. But 2 weeks later, she canceled it, proving once again that toxic relationships are like bad Wi-Fi signals. Hard to get rid of, and they keep coming back at the worst times. By January 24, 2009, the situation had spiraled beyond control. Evidence suggested Nova was holding Ava in her arms when she was shot. Noah, who was left alone with the bodies for hours, later told investigators that Goings was responsible. To make things creepier, the little boy said Goings even gestured for him to stay quiet. Because apparently being a murderer wasn't enough, he also wanted to audition for World's Worst Magician. Surveillance footage placed Goings' vehicles near the townhouse in the days leading up to the murders. Afterward, he fled to Michigan City, Indiana, where police tracked him down. They found him chilling by a hotel pool and doing laundry like nothing happened. Imagine thinking you can wash away murder charges with a spin cycle. Investigators later discovered gunshot residue in his car. At trial in 2013, Goings denied any involvement, but the jury took just 4 hours to convict him of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge labeled him a predator, which is legal talk for "you're not getting out, ever." Eddie Curry was granted custody of Noah, while Nova's family was left to pick up the pieces. Her mother turned her grief into advocacy, becoming a strong voice against domestic violence in hopes of protecting others from experiencing the nightmare Nova could not escape. Len Bias's tragedy. Len Bias wasn't just good at basketball, he was the kind of player who made defenders wonder if maybe they should have picked a safer sport, like chess. At Maryland, he was unstoppable, and by 1986, he was already being hyped as the guy who could keep the Boston Celtics on top for another decade. He wasn't just good, he was dominant, winning ACC Player of the Year twice and making first-team All-American. When Boston drafted him number 2 overall, fans were already imagining Bird feeding Bias alley-oops and the rest of the NBA crying themselves to sleep. But the story took a cruel turn. Just 2 days after the draft, Bias went out to celebrate. It should have been a night of laughter, champagne, and bragging rights, but instead, it turned into tragedy. Cocaine entered the picture and Bias's heart gave out. He collapsed, and despite frantic efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead at just 22 years old. The fallout was enormous. The Celtics lost a cornerstone player before he even touched the court. The University of Maryland faced scrutiny for the culture around its athletes. And Congress, never one to miss a chance to make headlines, quickly pushed forward strict anti-drug legislation in Bias's name. Friends remembered Bias as more than just a freak athlete. He had swagger, charisma, and the kind of confidence that made you think he'd already seen the future. And that future had him in the Hall of Fame. Instead, his name became linked to one of the darkest what-ifs in sports history: Tim Donaghy scandal. Tim Donaghy was supposed to be just another NBA referee. The guy in gray who blew the whistle, handed out technicals, and ruined your team's comeback because apparently your star player breathed too hard on defense. But in 2007, Donaghy's name became bigger than any player he ever officiated. That summer, the FBI revealed that Donaghy had been betting on NBA games, including some he was reffing. That's the sports equivalent of your teacher setting an exam and then betting on which students fail. He admitted to using insider knowledge, like which refs hated which players, to make his picks. Suddenly, every bad call fans had ever complained about felt justified. Donaghy pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and transmitting betting information through the interstate commerce. He was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release. The NBA was humiliated? Commissioner David Stern called it the worst scandal he'd seen in decades, and the league scrambled to assure fans that games weren't fixed across the board. Donaghy, meanwhile, doubled down on the drama, later claiming the league pressured refs to favor certain teams and extend a playoff series. Whether you believed him or not, one thing was clear. The guy turned every NBA fan into a conspiracy theorist overnight. Kobe Bryant's Colorado case. Kobe Bryant was one of the most electrifying players the NBA had ever seen. By the early 2000s, he was a global superstar, young, rich, and already collecting championship rings with the Lakers. But in 2003, his golden image took a hit that shook both basketball and pop culture. That summer, Kobe was in Eagle, Colorado for knee surgery. He stayed at a resort where a 19-year-old hotel employee accused him of sexual assault. The case instantly exploded in the media. Overnight, Kobe went from being the face of the NBA to the center of a criminal trial. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, late-night TV hosts had a field day, and suddenly, everyone had an opinion about what did or didn't happen in that hotel room. Kobe admitted to having sex with the woman, but insisted it was consensual. The prosecution argued otherwise. The case dragged on with every new detail making headlines. Eventually, in 2004, the criminal case was dropped after the accuser declined to testify. A separate civil case was settled privately, with Kobe issuing a public apology that, in true legal fashion, admitted regret without admitting guilt. The fallout was massive. Sponsors like McDonald's and Nutella dropped him. He had to repair his image both on and off the court. And let's not forget, he also had to patch things up at home. The infamous apology ring he gave his wife Vanessa was a $4 million diamond. That's not just jewelry, that's the kind of rock you give when "I'm sorry" really needs to shine from space. Over time, Kobe rebuilt his legacy. He went back to dominating the NBA, won more championships, an MVP, and even an Oscar. But the Colorado case never fully disappeared. It remains one of the darkest chapters of his life, proof that even legends can stumble once in a while. Donald Sterling scandal. Donald Sterling owned the Los Angeles Clippers for decades, and let's just say he wasn't exactly beloved. The team spent most of his tenure losing games and setting records nobody wanted. But in 2014, Sterling went from cheap owner to full-on national scandal. It started when TMZ released audio recordings of Sterling making racist comments to his girlfriend, V. Stiviano. Among other things, he told her not to bring black people to Clippers games, which, considering the NBA is mostly black players, was about the dumbest thing he could have said. It was like telling a chef not to use salt. Good luck making that work. The fallout was instant. Players threatened boycotts, fans were outraged, and even other owners wanted him gone. Adam Silver, who had just taken over as NBA commissioner, came down like Thor with a hammer. Sterling was banned for life from the NBA and fined $2.5 million, the maximum allowed. The league then forced the sale of the Clippers, which Sterling had originally bought for just $12 million. His wife sold the team to Steve Ballmer for a jaw-dropping $2 billion. Sterling's punishment ended up making him richer than ever, which is either ironic or just the universe having a sick sense of humor. For the NBA, the scandal was a turning point. It showed that racism, even whispered behind closed doors, wouldn't be tolerated. For Sterling, it was the end of his basketball run and the beginning of his career as the most hated owner in sports history. The NBA has given us some of the greatest moments in sports history, but it's also seen some of its darkest chapters. From heartbreaking tragedies to legal battles and scandalous owners, these stories remind us that behind the glitz of the game are real people, real flaws, and real consequences. But if there's one thing the league has shown, it's resilience. The game keeps moving forward and fans keep filling arenas because basketball is bigger than any one scandal.